So maybe let's move on to talking about change. What is change anyway? Again, here, like I have been doing all along, I'm not giving you an answer. I'm just posing some definitions that you may come across. So change is about making or becoming different. It's about movement to an idealized state. Maybe it can be looked at as an adjustment or an adaptation. And I'm sure you all have got some ideas also about what is change. It's a topical expression today where people say it's happening all the time, and indeed it's happening, and maybe it's happening at a much faster pace. So why change? Why do we have change? It's because circumstances become different, times become different. Sometimes you just have got to survive, like what's happening right now. The COVID says, hey, look, I'm going to take out millions, and we've got to survive. Now, all of a sudden, we are moving around with masks. We don't shake hands anymore. We do the elbow bump or whatever it is that you do. The Japanese had it all right. They knew how to bow. Sometimes it's because there's competition, so you need to change. There are so many reasons why change would happen. It could also be because there are expectations. If you are working in an organization that has got shareholders or stakeholders, when their expectations change, you will need to change the organization. Now, I said earlier that change happens. But two things. It can be managed, at least to a point. And that's where leadership likely has got to come in. Change also can be imposed, like what we're talking about here. Maybe I'm over-utilizing the example of COVID. Maybe let's go to the time of Zimbabwean independence, for instance. The governance had changed, and a lot of organizational beings had to change because the overall environment had changed. When change is imposed from outside, you either sink or swim. Again, leadership becomes quite important at that point. Now, I just want very briefly to touch on some of the most dominant leadership thinking. And it's I'm going to talk to you about two very influential change leaders, Levin and Kotler. Starting with Levin, and I'm not going to go into this in detail because I think most of you would be familiar with them, with the detail. But Levin's model basically said you unfreeze, you change, and then you refreeze. And there's detail in the unfreezing, there's detail in the changing, and there's detail in the freezing. But one thing that you can see in all the detail, the leader is at the top, is in charge. He determines, he ensures, he creates, he communicates, he dispels, he empowers, he anchors, he provides, etc., etc. You can see an assumption that the leader is in charge. He sits in the swivel chair. He's in charge from the corner office. Maybe, maybe not. If you look at Kotler's 8-stage model, again, also the leader is in charge. He create, you form, you communicate, you remove, you build, you anchor. And he talks about steps. It's very organized. And you can see that, in fact, those in charge are responsible for change. Really? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. My own reflection is that Levin and Kotler's change models are excessively rational. They are planned, linear, and prescriptive. They're trying to deal with a very messy reality, something that is very complex, something that is high on randomness and non-rationality. And that's why a lot of these change models actually don't work, because they are inappropriate. What is required right now, and in the complexity that we are trying to deal with, and that large organizations have got to deal with, is non-linear thinking. Strategic thinking, thinking where you sometimes have got to fill in between the dots. And sometimes you've got to go forward, and sometimes you've got to come back 2 steps back. That is what really change management is all about. Now, let me just move on to the nature of change. I'm going to unpack this in a few slides, but it's important to understand that at the very basic level, there is intrapersonal change that's happening within the individual. There is interpersonal change, which is happening across individuals. There is organizational change, excuse me, which is what is the subject of today's discussion. And then, of course, there's socio-economic change, which is the enveloping environment. I think if you are looking at organizational change, you can't lose sight of intrapersonal, interpersonal, and socio-economic change. Another way of looking at that is the first level of change is maintenance change. Like I will change my clothes in the morning. There's incremental change, which basically is tweaking here and there, but the fundamentals remain the same. There's transformational change where really there's very significant change. The organization all of a sudden now is now pursuing different goals, for instance. But then there is also systemic change, which actually is changing even who the stakeholders are. The environment that you are working in is beginning to change also. The scales of change vary. And if you are going to be managing organizational change, and we normally assume that transformational change is the pinnacle of organizational change. Maybe, maybe not. Let's just touch a little bit on socioeconomic change, which is the enveloping scale of change. At that level, there are no truths, but perspectives. And we must appreciate that people are entitled to their perspectives. The mere fact that they don't see things from your point of view doesn't mean that they are wrong. No, it just simply means that they are looking at things differently. And which is why at that level, transparency is important. I mean, if you're a politician and you don't believe in transparency, big problem, because you are not managing change at that level. But maybe that's not the real subject of today's discussion. Let's just look at organizational change. At that level, but bear in mind that you still have got to be aware of what's happening at the top there, at the higher level. If we come to organizational change, it's about corporate citizenship. And the organization there is there for people. Yes, it might be there for the shareholders, for the stakeholders, for the employees. In fact, that's the kind of thinking that one needs to do. But even those people who are not directly involved, if we are producing effluent and we are just chucking it into the environment, obviously, we are not serving the people. The organization is there for people. If you start looking at an organization like that, chances are you actually are now grappling with issues of organizational change. It's not about changing your tie in the morning, no. It's a lot more than that. Now, interpersonal change obviously becomes quite important within the organization. And interpersonal change is about collaboration, interacting with others. Breaking the silos, I think, is the expression that we often hear about. And I think also another subject of interest is that of maturity. Nowadays, there's talk of emotional intelligence and the like. I prefer the term maturity. Maybe because I have long passed the 60-year age, and I think maturity is cool. But maybe it's not that really, because sometimes you come across some 60-year-olds who are quite immature, and you bump into 20-year-olds who are extremely mature. Let's look at interpersonal change. This is change that happens within. And I think a lot of leaders actually need that. If one looks at my own doctorate training, it ended up being that. I could not change what I was trying to change, and I ended up the one changing. Intrapersonal change is about reflecting on what you're doing, reflexivity. Why do you need that? Because sometimes you don't know, you're just ignorant. Sometimes you are resistant, you know, but you don't want to change. But In my study, what I found most interesting was that you can actually be immune to change. It's not like you are resisting, you are actually just immunized. So let me use a controversial illustration. If, say, for instance, you believe that it's wrong to be a homosexual, you are immunized to thinking that a homosexual is a human being. You already believe that there is something inhuman about that. So the moment you see something gay, you immediately say that's wrong. Or if, say, for instance, you're a racist, the moment you see a white person, you think, that's an enemy. that is a programmed thing, maybe from social upbringing and things like that. Immunity comes in different shapes and sizes. Maybe I'm not giving the best of examples, but reflexivity can, to an extent, moderate that. Now, when you look at some of the theories of human growth, for instance, we say the pinnacle of growth is when you have self-actualized. True, right? No, it's not true. The pinnacle of growth is where you actually have transcended yourself. You are no longer concerned about yourself. You are actually maybe now more concerned about survival of the species. Maybe not just simply the human species, but all living entities. But maybe not just living entities, but maybe the universe. Now, that might appear like I'm just coming up with very superficial things, but remember, we are human beings. I have been trained and I've gotten to think that there is no God. The science can explain what we're doing, and we have got a universe which has got an order of its own. But what that means essentially is that the human race is not the center of the universe. No. Neither is the Earth the center of the universe. So where is the focal point? One doesn't really know. But anyway, without over-explaining this, transcendence is, excuse me struggling with the words here, but maybe let's just look at it as looking at things from the balcony. Try and have a little bit of an oversight, an overview of what is taking place. The bigger the overview, the better insight you have. Let's just move on to what are the targets for change. You can target the players. That's probably the basic target for change. So if you want to change the organization, change the leader. Things can start happening differently. Change the players. Things can start happening differently in an organization. Or you could change the field. So instead of us actually being Zimbabwe Railways, we start doing something completely different. We start trading something completely different. Maybe we are now, instead of rail transport, we are now using articulated trucks. Maybe not so good an example, but that's another change level of a target of change. Or alternatively, you change the game altogether. So I might be coming up with the wrong example, but I believe Nokia at one point was in chip building before they went into producing cell phones. But where is Nokia today? Yes, it's there, but it's no longer the pinnacle. We know that at one point, Nokia was the standard of a cell phone. Today, it probably is Samsung. I don't know. Maybe some people will say it's an iPhone. I don't know. Maybe it's Huawei. But maybe the next level is not necessarily a cell phone. It probably might be another communication gadget altogether. The game could be completely different. Let me just touch a little bit on some of the follies or pitfalls of change. And I've got some few examples here. If one is going to be managing change, the last thing that you want to do is to be parroting. I playfully always say, don't be Aloysius. Aloysius is my name. I'm the only one who can be Aloysius. In fact, I believe there are quite a few other Aloysiuses out there. I'm just saying this in jest. Parroting doesn't help in change management. You need to actually understand yourself, what is taking place, and figure out things on your own. Apply your own mind to what is happening and what you understand. Don't use blinkers, and blinkers could very well be the frameworks that you are using to understand things. So if you understand things like I do from an industrial psychology standpoint, you might be missing things which apply if, say, you were an economist, or if you were the owner of the business, or if you were a Christian. Because whilst I'm saying there is no God, maybe I'm missing a lot of things. I'm wearing the blinkers of an atheist. How do I know? I don't know. And I cannot presume that I know. Sometimes also when we are leading, we start engaging in make-believe. We start believing in our tools to an extent where we actually think that they are giving us a reality. We have heard of the story of the little boy with a hammer who believes anything can be fixed with a hammer. Of course not. There are times where the hammer is the solution, but sometimes it's not. I'm sure you can come up with other follies and pitfalls in change that I've not touched on. There is plenty. But if you look at organizations as a complex adaptive system, there are certain realities that you must presume. I say presume because reality is very tenuous. We are talking of organizations which is social reality. We are not talking of engineering where a bridge is there at one point. In social reality, the bridge is there today in one spot, next time it's somewhere else. And next time it's not a bridge, it's actually a house. It's something completely different. Just some few bullet points that I would like to cover with you. When you presume an organization to be a complex adaptive system, one thing is that it's important to look at the agents' perspectives, the kind of mindsets that they have, particularly the living agents. You need also to understand that there are self-organizing networks that are taking place. So yes, you have got an organ, you are the leader, you've got a structure, you've got allocated responsibilities, but there are also some networks that are happening, some of which you may influence, some of which you don't even have any influence on, some which appear and then some disappear. There is co-evolution at the age of chaos. Certain things are more certain, but then they gravitate towards chaos. And there is that period or that level of what is called the chaos period, the region where there is a tension between chaos and order. And that's where change actually takes place. That's the exciting level of or stage of change. It's about organizations or recombinations, systems evolution. Things are adapting. Again, understand that the organization is live. Some of the presumed realities that organizations are relationship-based. They depend on two-way communication. If you have got an organization that privileges one-way communication, and this tends to happen in the political realm, when it's like that, you don't have an organization or you are not leading. There has got to be open two-way communication, and maybe it doesn't have to be two-way. It could be three-way, it could be 360-degree communication, but communication is very important. Even with inanimate things. That's why even in the inanimate world, there is communication. That's why order then appears. But maybe that's a story for another day. Time doesn't allow me to expand on that. Let's just look at another slide with some presumed realities. And one of the things is that you want to leverage order generating rules. What are the things that are generating the rules? And if you can understand those, you can leverage on them. And that's how you can overcome the limitations of the rational, linear approaches to change management, the top-down change management approaches. I've worked in organizations where I actually recognized that there were certain leaders who were not even being paid to be leaders, but you could see that they were influencing, they were directing, they were creating safety networks, things that we say leaders do, but they were not being acknowledged. Wouldn't it be a pleasure if you can recognize and be able to tap on these, because your change management can be even more effective. Again, if you look at organizations as complex adaptive systems, you would need to understand that you need to go beyond the bureaucratic models, the models that come from the days of Taylor and Fayol, hierarchy, responsibilities, job descriptions. I'm not saying these things don't apply, they apply, but there is a life beyond the corner office. There's a life beyond the job description. There's a life beyond prescription, order, and all these things which are bureaucratic. There are those things that are imagined, that just happen, where things you just have got to adapt. It's all about organization. Now, if you're a leader from a CSA or CAS perspective, two things are very primary. You need to provide sense in what is taking place. You need to provide meaning in what is being done. And chances are you may not always be the one to provide the sense and to provide the meaning. But if you can be able to do this all the time, chances are you automatically are in charge, or you are a leader, or you can lead. It's not about exercising power and force and the like. It's a completely different way of leading. So when you're formulating problems, you need to appreciate and value variations in views. You need to capture diversity. The moment you have got a situation where everybody is thinking the same way, you've got a problem. You've got a problem. Somewhere along the line, you're going to come unstuck. It's important to create diversity. So if you have got in your field there, in your organization, in your team there, that's that guy who has got an earring, and you're saying, but why does this guy wear earrings, man? Earrings are for ladies. You might be missing a point. Maybe that's the guy who has got a different way of doing things. I don't know, maybe not. Another point also to recognize is this capability, which we call dynamic or adaptive capability. Let me illustrate that with the examples of an example of a BMW, the car. The BMW is designed around adaptive capability. So when you're driving a BM, it's got technology there where it senses the conditions of the ground, whether it's wet, whether it's slippery, it's got soil and the like. The elevation, the angle of movement, the speed at which it's moving, and it can deliver power in keeping with the environment as it's moving, as the engine becomes hot. Even inside the cabin itself, there's climate control. It's got adaptive capability. And that's a leadership capability which has been defined. And if we were to sit down today with the business psychologists, they'll be able to tell you what constitutes adaptive capability. But basically, it entails flexibility and adaptability. It's not about predictability. And even the way one leads, it's about introducing and allowing discretion and granting autonomy. Okay. I've been babbling on, and maybe I need to just recap and say, what are my thoughts really? What am I saying about leading organizational change? Again, I start off by saying the mission defines pinnacle leadership. Where are we going to? What is the sense of this organization? What is the meaning behind what we are doing? It's about serving and saving humanity. Sense-making and meaning-making. That's what leadership is all about. I'm saying change can be influenced, but it happens bottom up. It happens when you understand the organization holistically, not simply from the perspective of the swivel chair. There are options to leverage those, and you lead without being in the corner of actually. And organizations are alive. Adaptiveness ensures survival. Otherwise, there is atrophy. You die. When one is inclusive, you are likely to prevail in the very dynamic and complex organizational environment that we live in. That, in essence, really is what I've been wanting to tell. If I have made things clear, I apologize. If I have made things unclear, I'm thrilled, because really I don't think we are in an environment where clarity is what is required. If I have left you wondering, I'm happy, because chances are you will think even more, you reflect even more. I believe you have got the capacity to influence change. Let me stop there.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mushayandebvu, for that insightful presentation. I'm sure you could see some of the comments in the comments box there, where people were dialoguing and discussing. People are starting to think, and I think you have done justice to that. Because what you have done, especially for me, is to say, reflect on what change is. What I have learned a lot here is that the moving parts. Imagine you are trying to manage something and the parts are really moving, and they have no control. The models that we have always used are linear, predictable, but the things that you deal with in real life are actually not predictable. More so if you go into, like Edwin is saying there, if you go into parastatus, very fluid. There is also a political dimension, a political network that you find in those organizations. I think, well done. Thank you very much for that. But I'll take this opportunity to give others an opportunity to ask questions, if there are any questions that people may have. Let's have the questions. You can put them on the chat or ask directly. You can just unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay, it seems there are no questions. I would like to thank you very much, Dr. Mushayandebvu, for taking your time. We started talking about this a while ago because we had also other commitments as well. But I'm happy that we have reconnected. I still remember the last presentation that we did was, I think when we were staying at close to 5 Avenue there, where
Yes,
we were talking about ZPA, and we had done some research that you were sharing with us, with Justin Jordan and others. Thank you very much, and reconnecting. We would actually want you, the president of ZPA is here. I'm sure at some stage they will be able to invite you so that you can share more knowledge with the psychology community here in Zimbabwe. They will learn a lot, even the history of ZPA and what we went through that time. It will also be crucial for the association. Thank you very much. I will keep in touch.
Most welcome. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Memory, for inviting me.
Thank you very much to colleagues who had joined the presentation. Please keep safe. Thank you very much. Good day.